Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to Data Platform Downunder. My name is Warwick Grudd, and actually my co-host normally is our presenter for our first session of June. I'll hand over to Martin, who will be taking us through telemetry, tools, and tracking on the Microsoft Azure platform very shortly. As mentioned, this session will be recorded and will be made available on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel, where you can come back at any point in time. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself to ask a question of Martin throughout the session, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer those for you. We've got one more announcement that you may or may not be aware of, but Data Saturdays ANZ is underway and will be held on June 26th. The website that you can go to, so datasaturdays.com, 2021-06-25 Data Saturdays, number 12. From there, you're able to register for this event. Now, this event is going over 12 hours. We're covering the full span from New Zealand time to Perth time. We'll be running a number of tracks. We're in the process of finalising those sessions, and they should be made available shortly. But you've got 12 hours of learning from multiple tracks. So if you haven't already registered, make sure you do register for this free event. Let everybody that you work with know who you think may be interested in that. So with that, I'll now hand over to Martin, and we'll kick off today's session.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Warwick. Yeah, look forward to Data Saturday coming up. Should be good. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about Azure Monitoring, which actually encompasses a bit more than the Azure platform. And rather than like one thing that does Azure Monitors, really sort of a collection of different pieces we can push together to do things like alerting and telemetry and tracking and all that sort of thing. So over the course of, I don't know, the last few months or so, I've had cause to dig into monitoring and data and metrics quite a few times. I found it quite a good little ecosystem to get into, and apart from that, it is actually a part of most of the Azure exams. So, you know, if you're doing things like AZ 200, 201, AZ 500, 104, they've all got some little piece of the monitoring jigsaw in, whether it's, you know, the whole monitoring ecosystem or just a little bit about monitor. Even like AZ 900, which is kind of the entry-level Azure exam, it's got stuff about monitoring in there, which I guess everyone should be familiar with, at least a little bit. And I guess when you put one of the Azure systems down, monitoring should be, you know, one of the key pieces that you are looking to include. Even if you don't use it fully out of the box straight away, you're going to probably want to add to that ecosystem throughout the lifetime of the product. So I know pretty much most people on here. Yeah, I'm Martin. Always keen to get feedback off people and carry on the conversation. So yeah, drop me an email, tweet, ask questions as we go through. So pretty simple agenda to get us going, really. Give a bit of an overview of the subject, and then we'll look at slides and dive into the portal, look around the portal. Slides are really kind of a memory jogger for me, so to speak. And then we'll just kind of summarize at the end. And if we've got to take any kind of detours along the way, questions and that, we can definitely do that. So I guess the first thing is, you know, why do we want to monitor?
Martin,
so, yeah.
Do you just want to share your slide deck?
Sorry, I'm sharing that on.
No.
Am I not? Oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I don't know how that got. I'm confused. Yeah. Thought that was already being shared. Lost my pointer. Okay, back. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We will start. Well, we won't start from the start again, but I'll back up a little bit. Yeah,
There we
so
go.
that was
Oh,
the most of the talking was on this screen. Obviously, me. Agenda overview. Look around the portal. Look around the resource. You can see my screen okay now, Warwick?
yes.
Right, cool. So this is this slide I was on. You know, why do we want to, why monitor? And or why monitor in the Azure platform? Because obviously it's a shared services model. Aren't Microsoft doing their own monitoring? And should we just be relying on Microsoft? Well, it is a shared service, and some of that shared service relies on us. So yeah, I guess like all of us, we built, you know, monitoring systems and logging and that sort of thing in things we've developed over the years. And sometimes it's like quite cumbersome. And I think the Azure ecosystem kind of abstracts that away from us a little bit. So I guess the main reason we've done it before is like security and mainly reliability, you know, track when things are going wrong, who's accessing our workloads and that sort of thing. But Azure kind of talks about the, I don't know, the pillars of a good Azure infrastructure. And mainly they're sort of, you know, security, reliability, operational excellence, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. So probably won't talk too much about cost optimization here, but there's a whole load of tracking you can do through with costs, like putting budgets on, spending limits, which you're probably all familiar with, raising alerts when they're near, and all that sort of thing. So that is one facet of the systems that we'll probably not go too near. But all of the other stuff we'll dive into, and we'll have a bit of a look. So, you know, when we've got our system in Azure, I guess we really need to be aware of the big picture to start with, the macro picture, as it were, and like the you know, the service level agreements that are within Azure, and they do get breached from time to time, not often, but it does kind of happen. So there's a page there we can look at. And you know, rather than taking Twitter's word or social media's word that you said that a particular service is down, you probably should keep your eye on the you know, the Azure Service Health page, and just notice that some of these services, although you know we've got the geographical regions along the top, and then they drill down into other ones at the next level. Some of these services are what they call non-regional. I've just lost my pointer. One of the problems of having two monitors that are different sizes is your pointer gets lost quite easily. Yes, so some of these services are non-regional, mostly things like, you know, CDNs, DNS, content delivery. But if we come all the way down, we'll notice that what we're going to talk about is management and governance. So in this kind of area, or obviously we've got the Azure portal, which is non-regional, but you know, we're going to be talking about Azure Monitor mainly, and the services that exist within Azure Monitor down here. We've got other services around there which we're going to look at a little bit to give us kind of guidance on what we're looking at. But out of the box, when we look at you know, through the portal, we get our Azure tenant, our subscription. We've got an Azure Monitor service there. It's there out of the box. It's collecting certain amounts of telemetry straight away without us even doing anything. But we can add to that and do other things with it over time. So I just moved my mouse and gone back and forward there. And something that you should be also aware of, which seems, I don't know, almost a little bit trivial, because we've all seen this, is the service health within within the portal. So obviously we've got planned maintenance there, health advisories, and also the health history. But two things that probably don't get a lot of mention are we can look at the resources, the health of our resources, but also the health of the services within Azure. So, and we can actually set alerts on those services. So if, for example, there's 179 services here. These are actual services, not things that I am creating. We could tick one of them. Have we got a problem with Sentinel? What region do we want it in? Note the criteria and all that. We're going to have a look at alerts a little bit more, but you can put actions on them to do things. Have alert rules. The ecosystem for sending alerts is quite full. So and this ecosystem kind of is the same throughout the system for alerting and doing things like that. So although it's kind of there out of the box by default, it's normally in people's menus over to the left somewhere. I've took it out of mine, but you can find it on your dashboard somewhere. It's normally on your dashboard or up there, the service health. It's there out of the box. So that's kind of the macro level, as it were, things that we might want to just take into consideration there. Like we don't want to be telling a client that something's down on the basis of people tweeting about it. So as well as those, there's also some other services where we can get advice. So these are not really, well, Azure Sentinel and Service Center are kind of monitoring as well, but Azure Advisor is mainly it's advice about about our ecosystem. So I know the AZ900 exam mentions this quite a lot. And there you go. There we see the pillars that I mentioned before. We've got cost, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance. And obviously we can drill into them, and they'll tell us how we can improve. And we might want to monitor those things. Again, we've got alerts there. This time it's in preview, but the alert ecosystem very similar. You alert all that type of thing. Get scores and all that type of thing. So Sentinel and Security Center, kind of very, very similar. Sentinel does a few additional things that Security Center doesn't. Security Center gives us a lot of recommendations similar to Azure Advisor, but Sentinel, I don't know, seems to be the new one-stop shop for security advice from Microsoft. But the central place for monitoring is really sort of Azure Monitor, and it exists out of box. Like I say, it's a non-regional service. It's there as soon as we create our tenants or our subscription. But within Azure Monitor, we've got a few things. So logs and metrics come out the box, and we can see the Azure activity log in kind of every service, but we can see it kind of more easily through the Azure Monitor. So let's dive over to the portal and let's look for Monitor and go straight into Azure Monitor. And really, the first four things here, the activity log, the alerts, the metrics, and the logs, kind of make up, I don't know, the bulk of the system, as it were. We can see down here we've got insights, and these insights kind of they're kind of available from the resource as well. So we've got like virtual machine insights that'll be available from the virtual machine tab. Storage accounts the same. Obviously SQL, and this is getting bigger. There used to be, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 things there, and it's kind of growing over time. We've got log analytics there. Now, log analytics used to confuse me personally a little bit because we've got log analytics there and we've got logs up here. So people refer to, well, the logs up here, you'll hear the term Azure Monitor logs, but if you want to look at them, you'll really be kicked into a log analytics workspace, kind of a default workspace, as it were, where you can say what you want to do. And log analytics is really a place where we can, we can store different types of logs, and we can use a language called KQL to, to look at data about our different services. I've got hardly any data in here because I've been, I haven't been in here recently, but KQL is Kusto query language, and it's kind of used to interrogate, data explorer. So let's forget login for a minute. Microsoft have got a product in here called Data Explorer, which can actually be used to load your data into. Think of it as a database, maybe not a relational database, but a database with a fast query language and very SQL-like. We can a good IntelliSense and all that type of thing. I've got hardly any data in my own portal, but I'm going to point us to a resource in a minute where we can see quite a lot of data. So that's logs. Metrics, you'll be kicked into what they call the Metrics Explorer. And, and we can build a new chart. We can look at different subscriptions and different resources. Again, I've probably got no real data in here to play with. Look at different disks, click apply. You can see any sort of metric you want about, here there's 4 by default because we're in the default metrics, but we can put more there, and you'll see a chart. Again, I've not really got any data in here, but you can filter some of these off to more of log analytics workspaces. So how do we do that? So if we go to one of our resources, let's go to Cosmos DB. So out of the box, we do get some alerts and metrics from different services. Let's just have a quick look at the activity log. So the activity log is there in every single service, and it'll tell you about what has happened in that service to what we call the management plane. So Microsoft, I guess the general industry standard is to talk about the management plane and the data plane. So what happened in the management plane would be, what is happening to the service, not in terms of the data. And the data plane would be, what interaction are going on with the data. So the activity log here is a collection of everything that's been happening lately. So we can see here that, I've been doing a few things on my SQL server. I reset the password just before we started because I'd forgot it. But not a great deal of stuff in here. Obviously, we can see what I've been doing, but if we click on one, we can go through to the actual JSON, and there's a bit of a richer set of data in there. Obviously, a bit harder to read and maybe not as nice. Maybe at some stage, Microsoft will put this into a better type of view for us. But that's really the activity log, the alerts, and the metrics. So let's have a look at getting some additional data from Cosmos DB. Before we do that, I'll just flick back over to the slides and just continue talking about that Azure Monitor ecosystem as a whole. So in the middle, we've got the Azure Monitor my pointer again. Yeah, I'll find it, doesn't matter. So on the left-hand side, we've got like the sources of the data, going through to the metrics and the logs in the middle, and over to the right-hand side, we've got actions we can take on that data. And there's actually a lot of actions we can take. So let's deal with the left-hand side first. Up the top, we've got applications. So the applications that we build, whether they're kind of on-prem applications or, you know, Azure functions, things that we actually code, we can decorate that code with other code that will ship the data off into the Azure Monitor ecosystem. That's called application insights. Yeah, you can just decorate your code with that. You can get lots more data moving down to operating systems as well. So whether you've got a virtual machine on-prem or in the cloud or even in a different cloud, you can, you know, so long as you've got an agent on there. So the monitoring system within Azure provides lots of agents, and one of those agents can be put onto the operating system of any virtual machine. And so long as it can talk back to the main Azure Monitor system, you can like pick pretty much any resources you like. For example, you could start shipping the whole application log off or the whole security log off in real time, which actually gives you quite a few advantages if you think about it. You know, if you're doing some, say, security monitoring and you're putting data through to the security log all the time, your security log is going to grow and it's going to get huge. So you could maybe set to roll that reasonably regularly, and in the meantime, ship it off to Azure in real time and just store it in the monitoring system there. And you can also, you know, if you're logging to the file system, you can actually use other Azure resources, maybe like what's it called, Azure File Sync. So you could put files to your operating system disk and then use Azure File Sync to ship those files off to Azure Files or Azure Blob Storage, and kind of work like OneDrive a little bit. You know, you've got the file in the cloud, it appears on your system, but you know, instead of taking up a gigabyte of space or whatever it is, it's just a stub, and if you need it, you can download it. So yeah, we can piece all these things together and make quite a nice little system. So we can monitor also at the Azure resource level, a resource group level, the subscription level, or the tenant level. It doesn't really matter. Anything within the Azure ecosystem, clearly this is what it's aimed at, we can get to. We got custom sources down at bottom, and basically we can put anything into this Azure Monitor that can, you know, if you can talk to a REST API, the REST API can talk to the monitoring system. So, you know, you could ship things into here from, you know, Amazon resources or anything like that. Moving over to the right-hand side, we've got at the top insights, and we're just seeing quite a lot of those in the monitor itself, and they're growing all the time for VMs, SQL, and that type of thing. And we push visualizations out to obviously dashboards. Power BI is the big one, and we've got something there called workbooks, which yeah, will allow us to visualize data, but also allow us to take actions on anything that's in the metrics or the logs. We've seen the metrics explorer and the log analytics, but log analytics is actually a separate service as well. So data that goes into the center bit into the metrics and the logs is only actually maintained for a certain period of time. I think within the metrics it's about 93 days, and within the logs it's maybe a little bit longer, but not too much longer. So if you want to maintain that data for longer, you've got quite a few options available to you, and one of those options is to push it off to a separate log analytics workspace. You've got other options as well. You can push it off to a storage account where you could store it indefinitely. I think by default a log analytics workspace, or a separate one, will store the data for about 2 years. And you can also, if you've got fast data coming in, you can send it off to event hubs and that type of thing. We'll take a look at that a little bit more later. You can respond to all these with alerts, auto scale. So if you've got metrics coming in saying my virtual machine's being used at 90%, maybe you want to scale that or do something like that. Maybe you want to scale Azure analysis services. Obviously you do them things in different ways, but one of them you could respond to an alert and have that scale for you. And you can integrate with other things like logic apps, export APIs, and that type of thing. So let's take a look at log analytics and how we can also deal with logs and store them for a little bit longer if we choose to do so. So, right, I'm just going to find my pointer on my it's disappeared. I lost. Oh, there you go. Found it. So let's just look at Cosmos DB. So it's pretty consistent the way it's been done. With the most resources have got a monitoring tab here. We've seen in the actual Azure Monitor there was an Insights tab there, so it's kind of inverted. When you see it in the Azure Monitor, it's Insights. When you see it in the actual resource, it's monitoring. And again, you got alerts, metrics, but let's concentrate on the diagnostic settings. So most resources have got diagnostic settings, and then it's got a list of the settings that we can collect. So let's go ahead and collect all of those for Cosmos DB. And these are all going to be different in different resources. Here we've got a lot of log data that we can ship off, but all we can do with the metric data is ship off requests. So maybe the biggest difference between logs and metrics is that metrics are really kind of numerical values. So, performance counters, in other words, that type of data. So looking at a metric on its own doesn't really give you anything. You clearly got to aggregate it or take it over time or do something like that. But let's say we want all of this. So we can actually send this now off to its own separate log analytics workspace. Here it's well, I've already set one up, so it's probably best to set one up separately, but you don't have to, don't think, or you never used to. So you obviously pick your subscription. You can pick your log analytics workspace, and then you can save that. One of the other places you can send them, you can archive these to a storage account as well. So here I've obviously already got a storage account. And the benefit of doing that is that you can store them for a much longer period of time. You can almost store them indefinitely. In fact, you notice let's refresh that page. So let's just pick one or two things this time. Yeah, now all those counters never came up the first time. With log analytics, you've actually got a default retention time to store it. I did notice as soon as I clicked the storage account, you've got a period of time you can actually store it for. I think, although I'm going to have to check this, that the 0 would be kind of indefinitely. So one of the things you can do with the storage account, which is nothing to do with logging at all, is you've got tiered storage. So you can start with hot storage, data that's going to be accessible maybe for 1, 2, 3 weeks. And then you can maybe archive it off to colder storage that's going to be cheaper. But when you access it, because you access it so infrequently, you might have a bigger cost to access that data. And then, data that's maybe older than a year or 2 years, you can stick off to archive storage, where, you've really got rock bottom prices. But when you go to access that data, you'll pay a little bit more. And it also might take a little bit more time in terms of like hours or maybe even days to get back. But you're paying like next to nothing just to have it there. So if I take Stream Analytics, sorry, right? Yeah. So I can't set the retention period for log analytics, but I can set the retention period for the storage account. We can also place data off to an event hub. If we've got data coming in really fast, we can stick it to an event hub and maybe look at that data with Azure Streaming Analytics, filter it in real time. And then the partner solutions come in at the bottom. I've never ever used this. I only actually noticed it fairly recently. But yeah, if you want to, and I've obviously got none set up here. So that's basically log analytics for you. You can actually, by default, set up you can set up a log analytics workspace quite easily, and there's a bunch of pretty straightforward to set it up, but there's a bunch of services that will set a log analytics workspace for you out of the box. So things like machine learning will kind of more or less insist that you've got a log analytics workspace set up for creating your machine learning models and so forth. So that's log analytics. And like I said, we've got lots of agents within the ecosystem. So on say a Windows virtual machine, we can have the main monitoring agent. Slightly different on a Linux virtual machine. We've still got the monitoring agent, but I don't think it's quite as in depth as what the Telegraph agent, which collects more monitoring off a Linux system. But I believe the Azure monitoring agent, the log analytics agents, and the Telegraph agents are kind of all going to merge into one. And yeah, and then there won't be so many agents to kind of deal with. But one of the good things about like these agents is you can actually just install them. So if you've got a machine on-prem and you want to ship your monitoring data off to the Azure cloud, you can basically download the monitoring agents, put it on your VM or whatever you're going to put it on. You'll get some security keys and codes and that, so you can link it back up to your tenant, and away you go. One of the good things about the SQL, just to pick on SQL because most of us are familiar with it, is if we deploy a virtual machine through Azure SQL, we'll be able to actually pick, and let's go ahead and do that right now. So if I just go to Azure SQL, it actually doesn't seem to be the way most people go when deploying any sort of SQL. You can see straight away that we've got, here I've got a variety of different SQL resources. I've got a managed instance here, and I've obviously got a SQL database here, which are both PAS. But here I've got a SQL virtual machine, and we can see we picked some metrics up there, which are obviously coming through the agent. So yeah, so if I just go to create an agent there, yeah, I can create any of them templates. I got caught out there a couple of weeks ago, not using one of these. A client said like, can you deploy a reporting services instance, and basically I'll supply you with a key. So I was like, created a blank virtual machine, put reporting services on it, and set it up as a evaluation edition, which gives 180 days. Then, as it transpired, for one reason or another, they either didn't have a key or didn't want to give me a key, and I had to basically rebuild it. So what I did find out of that, to take a bit of a tangent, is some of these images, maybe not for SQL engine, but certainly for reporting services, creating it from the template obviously gives you the license. And the license didn't seem to have, well, in this case, it didn't have any additional cost. But in other cases, it has like a very small additional cost for the entire license of the virtual machine. So yeah, definitely a good way to go, creating from templates. Obviously, it saves you the hassle of installing the agent. Yeah, so there we go with that. So let's flip back over to the I've lost many windows open. Like everything on my machine. So let's look at taking action and alerting. So we set up our alert. So we set up our monitoring, and now we want to alert on it. So how would we kind of go about doing that type of thing? So if we go back into our monitoring again, and maybe have a look at our metrics. Let's go to new chart. Pick something there that we want to see. Let's have a look at maybe our disks again. We'll apply that. So we come over here and we can create a new alert rule. So if we hit alert, we've got actually quite a lot of things to put in here. I was actually surprised when I first seen it that, you know, the level of detail it's gone through. So obviously we select our resource. I'll create. I just pick anything just for the sake of speed. And maybe that wasn't a good thing to pick. I'll create a SQL database. So go for, and let's create a condition. And I'll just pick anything condition. I'm deleting SQL data warehouse. Okay, so those two aren't too interesting. The two things we do. What is interesting is the next bit, the actions and the alert rules. So when I create an action, what we've got to do is first create an action group. We can do these separately than doing them in the actual portal here. So I've already created two, but let's just create a new action group. So obviously pick a resource group to put it in, and we call it, or doesn't really matter, data platform Downunder. And you need a display name. It's got to be shorter. Now, here's the interesting bits going over to the notifications tab and the actions tab. So with the notifications tab, we can just say, you know, what do we want to do? So alert. So the first one, that's just basically a role. It's just there for convenience, really. It's like email all my global administrators, or just, you know, or just email something else. You give it a name, and then you can do a whole host of other things. Obviously, you can send an email, SSMS. You can push notifications if you've got them set up. You can even get a call. You can even get a voice call to a number that you specify. Lots of these have got, you know, you can get a certain amount for free, and after that you pay for them. Some countries are actually really, really expensive. I think in Belgium you've got to it's like 45 cents for a call. But yeah, it's quite amazing that you can do all this stuff in here. But let's flick over to actions. Let's just dismiss that and go to actions. So actions can be quite detailed, really. We can now take a set of steps to deal with the situation that's come up. So we can actually just filter it off to, you know, our ITSM system, should we want to do so. Obviously, you'll have to set it up over here. I've got no ITSM system set up, but you can set that up over here. Or you can choose, you know, a logic app or an Azure function, and do something with them. You've got the option to obviously do secure webhooks, or, you know, just HTTP webhooks, or there's or you can just do it like a PowerShell runbook, whether it's a graphical runbook or another type of runbook in there. So I'm not going to set either of those two things up, but yeah, the amount of options we've got, you know, we can self-heal, as it were. I guess that's the intention of doing all these things. You know, one of the strengths of the cloud is, you know, it's agility, and obviously there's a lot of agility built in, but we can build our own agility into the applications that we've created. So that's those. Now, just before we finish, well, I've got a few other things to do. Just wanted to talk about application insights. You can actually set it up so you can see a map of how your application interacts with other applications around it, which can be quite good for troubleshooting. It's a little bit in depth to set up, but you can yeah, you can definitely do it, and you see a map kind of like that. We've also got another feature which is very, very similar, called Network Watcher, which I don't know if you ever noticed, when you create a virtual machine, you get a resource set up called Network Watcher, and you've got if you take a few additional steps in there, you'll be able to see how your resource maps together with other resources in the Azure ecosystem. But before we just go off and finish, I just wanted to, you know, I'll touch on some SQL stuff, because obviously we are a SQL group. One of the interesting things that I had to do a little bit lately myself is set up auditing. So, you know, obviously at the moment I'm in a normal standard on-prem SQL instance. This is on my laptop. So if I want to set up an audit, you know, clearly I've only really got a few choices of where I can put it. I can either put it to a file, I can put it to the security log, or I can put it to the application log, which obviously brings up the fact that I'm probably going to run out of space, you know, especially how I've got a big audit going on. You know, if I'm auditing something that is going to generate a lot of data, Clearly, I might run out of space at some stage. We don't get the option here to stick it to an Azure-based location. However, if we say come over here, I've got a managed instance here. And if I go down to audits here and go new audit here, then I get obviously a very similar screen. And the destination that I can pick URL, or I can pick an external monitor. Let's just go create that to a URL. And if I browse, I obviously ask to authenticate to my subscription. Shouldn't take too long. And then, yep, I can pick a storage account and maybe a container that I want to stick it in. And note that it's going to say in it that it's got to create a service access credential for me so that this audit can access my storage account. So let's just say it can do that. And let's say OK to that. If we set up a new audit specification and just pick something here that is going to actually probably generate quite a bit of data just out the box. I think login success. I think there's a whole load of automated processes that are going to log in. So let's link that to the audit that I think I've just set up. That's number 5, isn't it? Yeah. Let's link that there. Let's start. Let's enable that. That's enabled. And let's enable that one there. And that's enabled. And I think now if we head over to our portal and our storage accounts, I think that's where I put it. You can see it if we go to containers and SQL audit. It's the date, it's the 8th today, yep. You can see, yep, that should be collecting data in there. If we go to properties and grab that. Yep, so it's still going to come out in the the tried and tested binary format that it comes out in, but we can we should be able to still read it if we go to up there. Having a lot of trouble with my mouse today. Scripts. Yep, and if I paste that URL in there. I'll see some data. Yeah, so there you go. So, I mean, worst case here, I see it as a good way of saving space. I'm not really going to have to worry about the space for things like, auditing. I know this was an example where we're using a PaaS service, managed instance, but when you want to collect telemetry from a virtual machine that's maybe on-prem or in a data center, and you've got to compare it to stuff that's going to go to Azure later, then setting up all this telemetry and sucking it off to an external Azure system and holding it there is really good for comparison purposes later on, when you've actually set the new VM up and that's working. You want to monitor it in the same way and then compare different bits of data. So just before I leave it, we've seen on my computer, we've seen log analytics, but there wasn't much data there at all. So if you actually go to this website, Microsoft have got what they call playgrounds, and one of them is a log analytics playground. So hopefully I remembered that URL. I'm not sure if I have. I think I've actually got. I might have a shortcut to it somewhere. Hopefully I have. Bear with me. Repos, not there now. Yeah, I've actually got a shortcut to it here. So this is actually an authenticated workspace. So, you know, if you haven't got an Azure account, you're not going to be able to get it. It's not like a publicly available site, but yeah, there you go. It's actually actually get you the URL. See the properties. Yeah, there's the portal.loganalytics.io, not .com. So portal.loganalytics.io. That will get you to the what they call the log analytics query playground. That's got a lot of data in here. So you just need your normal account, and you can come in. Some of these buttons are grayed out. You can't export data or you can't add rules. You can't do a few things, but you can definitely play around. One of the things I didn't touch on was exporting data. So when you've looking at data, obviously some of this data can be quite extensive. If you can download in from the portal, I think you're limited. It's quite a big number. It's probably about 30,000 records. But if you siphon them off with PowerShell, you'll be able to get a whole lot more data. So hopefully there's still yeah, trust me to pick something that's not there. But that's somewhere where you can go and play with all this data, should you wish to do so. So let me just. See my summary. So we had a look at Azure Monitor, the central place for monitoring everything, logs and metrics and activity logs are the main things that go in there. We can kind of enhance that by pushing off data to log analytics, where we can use KQL to examine it and drill down into details about that sort of thing. We've got other resources that we can set up here. I've just used the example of virtual machines, but most of them have got additional diagnostic settings that we can use to push additional data off to log analytics, where we can kind of set up alerts on that data and either scale if we need to, or take some sort of action based on the alert using an Azure function or a runbook or a webhook or something like that. And, you know, should we want to monitor things outside Azure, different services, we've got REST APIs we can use to filter data back into the Azure ecosystem, and various agents we can use to put on virtual machines to feed data back into the system. So that's the end of my short presentation. I will now hand back to Warwick.
Thanks, Martin. Got a bit of an echo. So thank you, Martin, for the insightful session, bringing us into what we can collect and analyze from our environments. With that, does anybody have any questions at all? We have got a couple of minutes, so feel free to put your hand up, take yourself off the mute and ask a question.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of like experimenting and that people can do in here. Yeah, and apart from anything else, there's a lot of this. A lot of the exams, this stuff makes up like 10–15% of a lot of exams. So, you know, if you cover this in well once, you're probably not going to have to do it again for the other exams you've got, assuming that's what you're going to do.
Okay. Martin, you have to have explained it fantastically. Nobody has any questions.
Or alternatively, Warwick, everyone's fell asleep, which is probably more like it.
Okay. Well, we do have a couple more minutes. We do have 2 more sessions for the month. So to give you an idea as to what we have coming up to round out the first 6 months of the year is next week. Why is my taking a little bit of time? So next week we have the reasons why DBAs just can't get over window functions with Shane Welgama. And then rounding out the month's sessions, we have an introduction to Azure Synapse Analytics with Jamie Johnston. Just after that, we'll have our Data Saturdays ANZ. So make sure that if you haven't already registered, make sure that you go along, register for that. We will have quite an array of speakers from both local, interstate and internationals, given the time zone spread that we are running this. If you do look at the website, it does show it starting on the 25th. That's because we've got it as UTC time. Okay, so it's starting at 9 p.m. UTC on the 25th and finishing at 9 a.m. UTC on the 26th. But for those of us in this neck of the woods, we'll be starting early on New Zealand time and finishing mid-afternoon, or I shouldn't say mid-afternoon, but late afternoon on Perth time. So with that, I look forward to once again thanking Martin. Thank you everybody for attending, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Cheers, Warwick.
Thanks everybody. Thanks, Martin.